see it's one past 1 minute into it. Hello, everyone. My name is Julius Ming'ala. I am going to be the moderator for this talk today. This is about, we've been having a lovely conference here, Prepare AI, and it's all about getting your artificial intelligence solutions done. Today, we're going to have a slightly different conversation, and we're going to talk about what needs to happen before you get to your ideal solution and you kind of move forward. So this is really about the ingredients that make your souffle, not trying to make it. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. All right. First, let's kind of see who we've got coming with us. I believe we've got quite a few interesting people. First person that we're going to be talking to here is Dan Carmody, who is the Director of Data Analytics and Intelligence at MasterCard. Now, Dan, who is MasterCard? MasterCard works to connect, empower an inclusive digital economy that benefits everyone, everywhere, by making transactions safe, simple, smart, and accessible. Hello there, Dan.
Hey, Julius, thanks for having me. Yeah, so Dan Carmody, been at MasterCard for about 10 years. As Julius mentioned, I'm working in the AI space, more on the data prep. So trying to make the data in a better format for our AI team and our data scientists. So happy to be here, happy to talk more about it. So
sweet, thanks for joining us. Next, we have Henry Campbell, who is the Director of Advanced Analytics at Spire. Now, who is Spire? Spire are an energy company who believe the greatest energy in the world comes from one source, right? People. So they have created a strategy to use that energy for the good and to have a positive, measurable impact on the world around us. Hello there, Henry.
Hey, Julius. Thanks for having me. Yeah, really excited to talk about preparing for AI. We're building that foundation right now at Spire, so this is relevant to us. Definitely excited to talk about it more.
Sweet, thanks for joining us. Next, we have Jonathan Andrews, who's the Senior Director of IT Information Governance at Charter. Charter is a leading broadband connectivity company and cable operator serving more than 30 million customers in 41 states through its Spectrum brand, which I'm sure a lot of you are quite familiar with. Hey, Jonathan.
Julius, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk today. I appreciate it. Obviously, data is key to everything we're doing from an analytics standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint. I try and focus on taking that raw data and turning it into consumable information. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to talk quite a bit about that process today.
Thank you very much, sir. But wait, there's more. We've got Kid Menke, who's the Data Engineering Practice Lead at 1904 Labs. 1904 Labs is a company that helps IT leaders digitally transform their business by implementing modern software and data solutions with innovative people who emphasize on customers and deliver results. Hey, Kit, how goes it?
Hey, Julius, thanks. Glad to be here. Like Julius said, my name's Kit. I'm responsible for the data engineering practice at 1904 Labs, and my engineers are helping the fine folks on the call, as well as others in St. Louis, build the data pipelines and platforms to support downstream users like data scientists. So glad to talk with you.
Thank you. There's some people who you're not seeing who are actually making a lot of magic happen here. One is Campbell Howard and Amanda Hoyt, who are helping things happen in the background. And thank you guys for joining and helping make this happen. All right, so we know who our panelists are. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some house cleaning, please, some housekeeping business. We are, some things to think about is one, we are actually recording this. So you will be able to view this recording in its entirety as a blog post in the next few days. So don't worry, we're recording all of this and you'll be able to go back and view some of these things. The next thing is attendees are muted by default. So essentially, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we will be able to handle those and answer them on the fly. So please don't be shy and bang into the keyboards. And as I can see, I'm seeing some questions coming in here. Hi, Charlie, we will get to you in a few seconds here. But let's just jump into set the stage. Why don't we set the stage of what's happening? All right. So one of the things we've really just got to talk about with artificial intelligence is, operationalizing data through AI and machine learning is critical for any organization that wants to remain relative, right? Second thing is we're going to speak about several local leaders, and we're figuring out all the proactive steps that these fine gentlemen here have done to make sure their organizations are ready to maximize those business insights. And you've already made the brain trust here, and let's just jump into the discussion. So, first question of the day, right? How important is it to the success of your data project that your data team work with your AI team? I think we'll basically start with, let's start with Jonathan.
Thanks. Obviously, the data piece is the underlying fundamental to what the AI team, what the analytics team, what the intelligence teams are all working with. And one of the things that I stress here at Charter with the teams is not all data is created equal. And the way data is presented, the way data is turned into information creates what I refer to as a fitness for purpose for specific elements, for specific situations where one piece of data is valid for one type of analytic, but completely unusable for another. Let me give you an example of that. We have at Charter, when we have two different contracting audiences. When we're selling our services out to advertisers who want to know the number of eyeballs we have on screen, then we want to include every subscriber we have. Charter has 100,000 employees who get free or discounted cable. So we include those people who are watching TV, seeing ads, and buying time. However, when we talk about dollars per customer, we're not going to include those people because all that does is detract from the average bottom line metric. So we want to be very careful. And that's why I say when we turn these into pieces of information, they are two completely different pieces of information for two different purposes. And that's key to doing any analytics downstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Fitness for purpose is really, really important. Dan, how about you? In your slice of paradise, how do things actually work and how do we make things work?
Yeah. So from our perspective, we don't work with our AI team day to day. So a lot of the stuff, I think, working and partnering with them to make sure that as we're building solutions, we're building them with them in mind. And so from our perspective, when we initially built out our platform, a couple of the key things that we saw were challenges on their side was trying to make data available faster for them. Before our solution, they were seeing data within days. After our solution, they're seeing it within minutes. And then the other thing is trying to understand how we could eliminate some of that data engineering work that they were previously performing that was taking up bulk of their time, and getting the data to them in a format that would make it easier for them to just start moving forward with their modeling and all the stuff that they needed to do from that perspective. So a lot of the underlying components we've built have been AI in mind. There's kind of call that the low-hanging fruit. And so we've knocked that out. Looking forward, I think keeping AI in mind in every one of our solutions is very important. I think partnering with 1904, we've actually embedded a data scientist into the feature team to try to keep that perspective in mind as we build out the solutions. And so I think, just having that relationship with the AI team to know, as we're building things, how can it be applied to their world?
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Henry?
Yeah, I mean, in the same vein as Jonathan was saying, we're trying to keep the business in mind as we're building out the data engineering side and the platform itself. We have gone through a series of integrations, and so there's a lot of challenges with disparate data sets, and so coordinating and consolidating all of that, has been a challenge in the past, but we've done a really good job of building that foundation and creating a unified model as kind of a first step. As we were talking about a minute ago, sort of reducing a lot of that time to value and increasing speed on delivering some of those data frames that we need to get accessible to our analysts on our team.
Yeah, that actually is a great segue to the next question, talking about speed. People usually talk about speed and volume. And the question here is, and I'll start with you, Jonathan. In your AI journey, how does data speed and volume influence your strategy?
Speed and volume have some interesting perspectives in the cable world, because we obviously, with our network plant, we are very close to the internet backbone, so we see a huge volume of traffic, which we can monitor, and some of which we actually control. From the volume perspective, we generate plus or minus 25 to 30 billion rows a day of just purely internet traffic off about a third of our network that is completely instrumented for capturing this, for doing intelligence on that process. Obviously, when you're looking at that kind of volume, you have a completely different compute storage criteria that you have to think about for how do you look at this, and how do you expand that storage? How do you build that in such a way that you can scale that very quickly and very easily? On-prem no longer becomes an alternative. You need to have high volume, high storage criteria, which forces a lot of the compute into the cloud. That's something that Charter has been reluctant to address over the last little bit, but obviously as we start getting into these more advanced capabilities, we are starting to make that move more and more every day.
Yeah, thank you for that. Hey, Dan, so if we peek under the hood at MasterCard, what would we see? How are you guys working it?
Yeah. So from our perspective, being a technology company processing hundreds of millions of transactions a day, it was very imperative for us to build a solution that was scalable. So everything we did, we didn't have the luxury to build out something small. I mean, we're talking various different events that come through our platform, and being in the fraud space and the decisioning space, we apply rules to transactions. So it's not only the volume of the data and the amount of data that we see, but it's the width of the data and the amount of rules that are being applied on our data sets. So I think building at scale and making sure that you're building solutions where the data is available fast is highly important. And then on top of that, it's the availability of the data, and building kind of a DR scenario to make sure that that's available across sites, especially if you're building products on top of that.
Yeah. And Henry, at Spire?
Yeah, it's huge for us. I mean, we're in the process now of updating our infrastructure across the board. And so, just for those on the call, we're an energy company, but the majority of our company is we own utility companies and across the Midwest and Southeast. And so we want to be more responsive to our customers. And so we're installing newer technology where we're bringing in more data, and sort of reflects the journey that Jonathan was talking about. We have been slower to adapt, to be able to process and bring in all that information, analyze it, get the insight back to our customers, and also use it internally. But we are right now currently working with 1904, building out a platform that is scalable, that's more adaptive, and that frankly has a lot more modern components and capabilities than we've had in the past. So it's definitely something that's customers are driving, but we're seeing the results play out right now.
Yeah, this is all fantastic stuff. It goes without saying that there's a lot of experience that comes from this, some of them not being particularly pleasant or slightly challenging. I think this brings us on to the next thing. Kit, I know you're a fan of time travel. If you could time travel and go back in time, what would you have done differently? And what that basically kind of translates to is, what are some key challenges you've encountered when starting an AI project?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is just making sure that your data is ready and understanding some of the different use cases for your data, because some of the pipelines we've built, over time, we've come to understand how it's going to be used, and sometimes it's that difference between an operational use case and an analytical one, where oftentimes a data scientist is really interested in running these huge types of analytical queries, and that might conflict with your kind of the main operational use case of one of the reasons that you're building that whole data pipeline in the first place. So I would say just making sure that you understand the users in that scenario and making sure that you have a good idea about them before you start.
Right. And, the users could be an API, it could be not just an analyst or something like that. You've really got to think about where your data is heading, who's consuming it, and all kinds of other stuff as well. That's great. Henry, challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely goes back to kind of how we started the conversation. I think getting the data framed up, working with our data engineering team to create those reusable buckets of information for our analysts, it's a challenge, and it has been a challenge in the past. I mean, we've faced bottlenecks just because of all the requests. Everyone is trying to be more data driven at our company and throughout our industry, and so we're seeing reliance not only just on the descriptive information that we want to provide, but on smarter analytical packages that may be out there, and all that takes time. And we're again trying to create an environment where we have a unified, reusable type of model that others that they can reuse that information and not rely so much on our data engineering team.
Oh, it's definitely challenging. Dan?
Yeah, I think outside of just pure process and procurement of hardware, the challenges that we've kind of faced are a lot of the same type of challenges. Working on a platform like this, it's taken quite a long time. Technologies change, and so as you're building this and you think you have the right technologies up front, a year down the road, things change so much. It's being able to kind of pivot and turn to make those decisions to change and to optimize your solution fast. And so on top of that, we talked about scalability and high volumes. I think from our perspective, just being able to optimize a lot of the different technology components in our stack has been a little tough. And we finally gotten to a point where we feel really comfortable with where we're at, both in our processing and ingestion. So a couple challenges there. I'm sure they're the last of them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not. Optimization is always a very tricky thing to get ahead of. So let me ask this, Jonathan, while we're still at it. Thinking about all of that, the next question I'd probably ask is, how do you make sure that your data informs business decisions and effectively supports business analysis?
Well, I think there's two pieces to factor into this, and one directly points back to somewhat of the last question as well, and that is there is a very different process which you go through from a discovery of a correlation and how you can do long-running queries, big data set analysis, versus how you can operationalize the decisions based on that analysis. And the infrastructure has to be completely different. Queries that for discovery can run for longer periods. For operation, have to be almost instantaneous. You have to be doing a lot more real-time detection. So the models have to be scalable to define to land how to apply to the right use case. The other thing that I think that is critical in this case is fully understanding not only the data that you're looking at, but also looking at the business process that's used to generate that data. Because if you don't fully understand the business process, the rules and the constraints that are being applied, you can very easily come up with either a meaningless or an incredibly wrong answer. Yeah. We had one case right after the purchase of Time Warner, when Charter bought Time Warner about 4 years ago. There was both companies had their own process by which they would ship for a new connection. They would ship equipment out to a home and provide for the resident to self-install where they had selected to. Time Warner had a much higher uptake on taking that option, doing the self-install, not waiting for a technician to roll the truck, but a much higher failure rate. They were generating 70 to 80% opt-in, but a 40% failure rate, where Charter was taking a 20% opt-in, but an 80% success, 90% success. So when they tried to do an evaluation of what was different between the two, they we brought in a company, they did a detailed analysis, they wrangled the data, they complied, they looked at demographics, age, intelligence, educational status. Are people on the coasts more intelligent than people in the Midwest? Are they more technically savvy? What's the answer? And they came up with all sorts of recommendations until someone pointed out to them that Charter by definition didn't allow anybody that was putting in a telephone line. 4 years ago, people still bought home landlines. We didn't offer that service to anyone that used that service, that product, which was the most failure-ridden piece of any self-install. Telephones are hard. And that was completely omitted from the analysis, and it rendered the rest of the analysis and the discovery completely moot because it didn't factor in a key criteria.
Oh yeah, that's really, that's a lot. You've really got to think about these things. But if we were really to distill it, to one thing, what is that one thing? I know you've talked about action and the things that kind of go into action. If you were to give us that one line, that one thing to take home that, would drive it all the way through.
That one thing has to be make sure that the data you're using is fit for the purpose that you're using it. Has to be that fit for purpose has to be the answer, because there are so many ways to get the wrong answer if you're not fit for the purpose you're trying to analyze for.
Right. I know there's in previous discussions that I've had the pleasure of watching you lead. You've talked about the different V's that come with to action. Variability is one of them. If you could kind of just unpack that for people who are on this call.
We touched on a little bit earlier, we touched on the volume and the velocity, the speed and the size of the data that you're looking at. But the other thing that to factor in, those are two of the main attributes around large data sets. The third one that has to be factored in is variability. And variability is where you see where an order can contain internet product, video service, telephone product, mobile product, and any combination thereof at any sort of offering within each of those within each of those products. So the same data construct can represent multiple different things in a perfectly valid manner. And your analysis has to be able to handle all of that variability in addition to the speed and the size of which it comes in.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for that. Dan, what's your one thing?
Aside from what Jonathan said, I think that the biggest thing is just making sure that you have an open relationship with the AI team and some of those other teams where you can actually get that feedback back into your pipeline, understand and make sure that you can pivot and help where needed. I think a couple of things that we took on earlier this year is we're in an agile process. So, to be able to quickly help where needed, we were able to establish some pipelines pretty fast that enabled some capabilities for our data scientists to move. And so having that relationship with them and understanding their pains was pretty important to us and to be able to provide solutions fast.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks for that. Henry?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one takeaway that I would have is to really think hard about operationalizing your data, your analysis, connecting the people to that operationalizing event. A lot of times, we get sort of down in the weeds on the data side, but on the business side of things or the customer side of things, we need to keep those connections in place to make sure that we're delivering the value and keeping sight of what really the intent of the model or the output really is. And we've had challenges with that. So that's something that we always try to keep in mind.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. Kit?
And only one thing. I guess hire 1904 Labs is the one thing. I would take what Jonathan said a step further and say it's really about making sure that you can trust your data. And the way you do that, I feel, is through good data ops principles. So making sure that you treat your SQL like the code it is, that you have automation and testing built in from the beginning, and you're implementing these data quality checks at every step of your pipeline, and making sure that you automate those as well so that you're confident in the results the data that you're delivering to production, and your users also have that same confidence.
Well, thank you very much, sir. That was fantastic. And I believe that let's kind of open up to the people who've joined us here. I know, Charlie, we told you we'd get to you, and now is your time. So get your pen and paper and let's get your questions answered. So Charlie basically asked, what different steps should small business or nonprofits take to secure their data infrastructure and address their unique challenges, right? So it's a specific vertical there that he's talking about. Kit, why don't you start off with this one?
Sure.
Send it around the table.
Yeah, I mean, for I think any small business or nonprofit, I mean, obviously they don't have the same resources that a large company will have and the same, data centers and things like that. So I would say try to do as little work as possible, depend a lot on public clouds and what they offer. And it depends on what type of data you need to secure, but all those clouds have solutions to help you make sure that your data is locked down and can be delivered. I mean, it's easy to deploy something on Amazon or Azure or GCP that lives in the correct region, so you don't have to worry too much about CCPA and GDPR type things. So I would say, long answer short, is just rely on public cloud. Try to take advantage of a lot of those resources that are out there available to you.
Well, that's great. Henry?
Yeah, I mean, the technology's changed so quickly, over the last 10 years. And so, I mean, if you're a small business, you have a ton more opportunity on the cloud side of things with managed services, the scalability, everything is there. I mean, at your fingertips. That would definitely be the avenue to take. And there's just a lot of opportunity there right now. And a lot of different opportunities. So, the choices are there. And it's something that continues to evolve. The capabilities there continue to evolve across the board. So it's exciting. I'd be excited if I was on the small business side with that out there.
Yeah. There's another question here. Thanks for that. There's another question here. How fast does your data need to be ready for analysis in order to trust it? Now, I know that John has talked about, variability, velocity, volume, discovery versus action. And Dan, I'm kind of interested on your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I can pinpoint a certain time. I think you'll know when you'll trust it when you feel comfortable with it. At least from our solutions, there's certain processes that in more of the data quality realm of understanding, are we getting the right data into our environment and making sure that you have the proper checks in place to understand if things are going south upstream. So one is just, do you feel comfortable with the data, and how long does that take? I mean, it depends on the size of the data, what your SLAs are. For us, ingesting so much data, I think we had, an idea of getting our data through the environments and persisted into our environment or our cluster within 30 seconds. And so do we feel comfortable with that? I think where we are today, I feel comfortable with that. I think, a year ago, I would have probably told you a minute and a half if we can make sure that it's right. And so as you kind of build your solutions and you optimize them, you try to shrink that time closer and closer. That's from kind of the persistent side. From the analytical side, we have projects going on right now building analytics off of this data. And so that's a whole nother realm of work, right? Is how do you build these aggregation levels to a point where you feel accurate with the level of aggregation that you're providing to the customers. And so that's a whole nother level of how fast should it take. We're trying to figure that out right now because it's taken longer than we hope.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's saying and doing, as they say, subject to local operating conditions, right? You have to be able to to operate in that. So basically, we have talked about a couple of things here, Dan, with having, I'm sorry, Jonathan, with having the discipline and everything to do with that. But it's very much a science, but it's an art as well. So there's a question here about that I kind of wanted to ask, which is how important is flexibility when when you're trying to realize these pipelines, when building these data pipelines?
Well, I think that the flexibility of the pipeline really, really depends on the variability of the data you're going to be looking at. If you have a solidly defined structure, and that structure is provided by third parties, it's coming off equipment, it's telemetry information, but it's coming off at very high speed, very high volume, that does not have to have the inherent flexibility of something that's looking at a more human transaction generated, business transaction generated analytics system. I think that anything that's going to be looking at equipment, at Internet of Things, at system generated or machine generated data sets needs to inherently be less flexible than human generated or business transaction generated, simply because humans make new ways to come up with to mess things up. Machines generally don't.
Yeah. that is very, very powerful. Yeah, so that's fantastic. So Henry, I'm going to ask you here, because we always at one point or the other come up with some great ideas, like with people who've come to this conference, I'm sure are going to go back to their organizations and have to go and think about the time of the year, talk turkey to someone and actually try and kick off and get the buy-in and sponsorship for whatever initiative they want to start on their journey to get there. How and when do you get, executive buy-in on a major data initiative? What's the strategies there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, obviously, on what that initiative really looks like. But I mean, for instance, right now we're going through a platform transformation, and there are a lot of moving pieces there. And the first thing that we really start with is really trying to sell the overall value through whatever business case or whatever proposition is out there. But beyond that, it's really how are we instilling a new culture with data kind of leading the way. And that's really the genesis for our department, was how do we instill more of a data focused type of culture within Spire to help lead operations, to help lead our customer interactions. And so with the transformational initiative, you kind of have to angle it differently, right? I mean, it's a different type of sell to leadership. It's not a pointed unidirectional, hey, here's a simple transaction that we're trying to do or build. Right. It's more of a complete package. And so, I mean, my recommendation is to really think strongly about the benefits overall, on the tangible benefits, but then a lot of the intangibles too. Like, how is it going to help us overall as an organization?
Yeah. In a nutshell, do your homework, right?
Right. Do a lot of homework.
Yeah. Hey, so Dan, I'm going to ask you this one. We've got a guy here called Michael who's asking scalability, right? At what level would AI be added value for implementations? And is it likely that AI can reveal and ask questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think from an AI perspective, I think, of course, I think, one of the things that we're trying to work through, at least talk through in the future is, now that we have the data available, now that we built these solutions on top of it, now that the data scientists have, kind of eliminated data engineering work, is how do we build automation into the pipelines of getting some of the work that they're doing with regards to modeling back in, automated back into the pipeline, so it's not so manual at this point. So I think from a scalability perspective, that's a whole nother, door that we have to open with regards to how can we support that. What does that look like? Connectivities between clusters, or segmenting our cluster out to specific work streams. And then from the AI, of course, I think answering unasked questions, just on we haven't really jumped into graph databases or anything from that perspective, but we know from our perspective when we run rules on our transactions that there's certain unanswered questions that just looking at it through a different lens will help us with. And so we're running some of those projects right now with regards to trying to, when we have customers that are trying to wonder, what rules should we apply to our transactions to stop fraud? Simple questions like that we know that we now have the data available to provide those answers to them. And those are some of the projects we're working on right now, is trying to be a little more proactive and more suggestive on what rules that you can create and where the optimal sweet spot is to stop fraud. And so.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Thank you. So, we have about 4 minutes left, right? And there's some really good questions coming in here. And there are just two I'd really like us to kind of cover really quickly. One, I'm going to lean on you, Jonathan, because of all the masterclass that you're giving. All you gentlemen are giving us a fantastic masterclass to kind of handle this one. Then the other one will just be quick fire answers. Then we can conclude. So, John, here it is. Have you encountered, obviously in getting through your journey, have you encountered misalignment between engineering and data scientists at your organization? And if so, how have you helped to align these different professionals around a data solution? Just kind of what are the quick blocks there?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen that. We see that regularly. We have different organizations doing the same type of analysis that are disagreeing with each other, and we have engineering. We have different business units. The fitness for purpose, because I'll go back to fitness for purpose again, because that's if you're doing analysis on the data that is identified and the information that's identified and specified for that and cleared for that consumption for that analytics model, then you're going to be a lot further along. If you're taking wild guesses at what things could be possible and what things could be brought into the analysis, you may get conflicting answers. So we try, from a governance perspective, that's part of my job, is trying to get that standardization, that definition of that information and how it can be used and how it can't be used.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for that. All right, now we have one quick burning question here, and it's really about schedule, which I think we'll probably go ahead and answer in an after session after this. But the basic question was, hi, Sean Murphy, we can see you. From an enterprise perspective, how quickly are your team members at Charter, Spire, and MasterCard able to own these platform solutions versus running them with partners providing guidance, direction, and expertise? It'll be a quick roundtable. It's tricky to give one specific boilerplate answer in terms of schedules. Does it depend, or off the top of your head, do you have a magical time? I'll just give a quick fire round. I'll start with you, Henry.
So I guess just to restate the question, so this is just working with partners versus trying to lift some of this internally?
Yes.
Is that it? Yeah, I think the partnerships definitely help. We've got a lot. I'm sure the same at any large company, but we've got a lot on our plates. And having partners like 1904 to be able to come in, give us the insight, kind of give us a roadmap, show us the way, the path forward, definitely helps accelerate things. And it's been a great partnership for us. So lovely.
Dan?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think as you build these stacks and jump into some of these technologies, it's hard to find talent that has familiarity with the stack that you're working with. So being able to rely on 1904 and some of the skill sets there has been great. I think we've been fortunate to have a couple people with knowledge, and some of that is just taking a strong technologist and training them to get them up to speed on some of the technologies that you're working with and giving them the right opportunities to learn. I think from our perspective, we are hiring. So anyone out there that is looking for a job, just contact me. But I think definitely the partnership's great. But sometimes you have to dig in yourself and learn and figure it out. So
absolutely. Gentlemen, this has been a fantastic masterclass. I'd like to thank Henry Campbell, Dan Carmody, Jonathan Andrews, Keith Menke, and of course we've got Campbell Howard and Amanda Hoy for joining us for this session. This will be recorded, and there will be a blog post encapsulating everything we've discussed today. And as always, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Julius.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yep, please do follow 1904 Labs at 1904labs.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/1904 Labs, or twitter.com/1904 Labs, I believe. Thanks again, everyone. It was fantastic. Cheers.